Hey, welcome to as we look at running on empty. Here's an interesting thing about running on empty. You don't run for long on empty. You run out and you are out. So today we're going to address that and maybe some things that we ought to do to make sure we're good when that happens. So when I was a senior in high school, I lived in Lexington, Kentucky. And Carmen and I started dating, and I was working for a couple guys that owned a lot of rental property and did a lot of odds and ends for them, painting and all that kind of stuff. And they gave me a truck of theirs to drive and said, here, just kind of drive it whenever you want. Old beat up truck, got about 10 to 12 miles per gallon. And they said, hey, one of the issues is going to be gas gauge doesn't work. So you're just going to have to track how much gas you put in and all that kind of stuff. So one Friday night, Carmen and I were going out, and we'd gone out to eat dinner, and then probably going to a movie or something, and I'm driving on, it's called Circle 4. It's basically a 4-lane highway that goes all the way around Lexington. And as we're driving, I can feel it just giving out, and I'm thinking, I'm running out of gas. And sure enough, I run out of gas, and I pull over, coast it onto the shoulder, and she looks at me with that look of, are you serious? And I said, well, I guess we're going to be doing some walking. And I knew where we were. We had a friend that lived about a mile away, and so we just kind of walked down the shoulder, then we kind of walked down into the ditch, over the fence. We got to Tim's house, and he helped us out. Two things that I kind of learned from that. One is this, is that, you know, in so many of the really important areas of our life, we don't have gas gauges. We don't have little meters, a dashboard that tells us, well, hey, I'm fine financially, but socially I need some work, or we don't have that. And so one of the reasons why we're doing this whole series, Running on Empty, is to help us take a look at those important areas and determine, hey, how are we doing? The other thing that I learned from that is it's really, really important to have good friends, especially when things go wrong, so important. And I want to get really practical today and just us look at the issue of how do I surround myself with good friends. And of all the people in Scripture that I can think of that were just surrounded by a lot of good people, King David really comes top of the list for me. So what did David do? And I want to just really quickly take a look at 2 episodes from the life of David about how good people surrounded him. And the first comes in 1 Samuel chapter 18, and it's talking about Jonathan, who's King Saul's son. And here's what we read. And as soon as he, talking about Jonathan, had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house, talking about David. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul, and Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. And what we see from that point forward is that Jonathan and David had made a commitment, a covenant with each other. Now it was very much a time of peace for them. They were looking down the road, in essence saying, hey, if times get tough, when times get tough, I've got your back. And both of them lived this out very, very well. Now you flash forward about 3 chapters later, and we have an entirely different scene. 1 Samuel chapter 22, the first 2 verses describes David when he's not in a good time. He's absolutely in chaos. He, in fact, is running from his life from King Saul. And here's what we read. Now David's fleeing from his life, and it says this, David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him, and everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul gathered to him. And now what we find is that David was surrounded by a group of men who just recognized in the heat of conflict they needed help. And I want to just encourage you, it's not too late. If you find yourself in the midst of conflict and deep, deep turmoil, it's not too late to reach out to some people. But you're really wise if you do that ahead of time. And what I want to do is, I just want to share with you 4 things. How can I be a person who ends up being surrounded by really good people, where my margin, I get a lot of margin from them because of just good friends that are around me? What can I do to just make sure that happens? I want to give you 4 things, 4 very simple things. One is, I want to encourage you to break bread with Jesus. I love the story from Luke where we get the story of Zacchaeus, and Zacchaeus really has no friends. And when Jesus walks by, he looks up at Zacchaeus and he doesn't say, "Hey, Zacchaeus, go spend some time with all these other people." Now, what Jesus says is, "I have to spend time in your house today." Interesting question. Why did Jesus have to spend time in Zacchaeus' house? Because Zacchaeus gives him nothing that he needs. Jesus says, "I have to spend time in your house because Zacchaeus needed it." Spend time with Jesus. Of all the relationships that you will ever have, the one that is the most important. The reason why we need to put margin into our lives in all of these areas is because it builds space for Jesus. So carve out time for you to spend in your relationship with Jesus. Be intentional about that. Break bread with Jesus. The second thing is this: break bread with other people. There's this verse from Acts chapter 2, verse 42. And it's talking about the very, very first followers of Jesus. And it gives us some patterns of what they did in their life. And it says they devoted themselves to 4 things: the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, the breaking of bread, and to prayer. And 3 of those are very easy to understand: the apostles' teaching, fellowship, and to prayer. But the breaking of bread part, there's a little bit of kind of argument over exactly what that means. Does that mean they took communion? I think they did. But I think part of it has to do is they just hung with people. They just did meals with people. They gathered together, they ate with people. One of the things that's just a big benefit for you right now is that you're in a life group. You are, in essence, breaking bread with people. But I want to encourage you to take it a step even more than that. Hang with people. Make a commitment to carve out time in your schedule to spend time with other people. That might be I don't know when to do that. Hey, can you get free for lunch? Then every week, pick a day of the week and you'll invite somebody, "Hey, do lunch with me." Just break bread with other people. Start building relationships. They take time. Third thing that I want to encourage you to be is to evaluate whether you are a filler or a drainer. If you spend time with people and people spend time with you, if you spend much time with a group of people, every one of those people in your life are either fillers or drainers. They fill you up. When you're finished and you walk away, there's just something about it. You feel more encouraged, you feel more energized. And there are other people that are not fillers, they're drainers. It's like, you're more tired, you're more exhausted, you're more frustrated, you're more hopeless. You're one of those in people's life. So in your questions this week, you're going to ask some questions about what are the type of people in your life that are fillers. And you're also going to ask the question, hey, what types of people are drainers? And I want to encourage you to listen carefully to the people that are around you as they describe drainers, and ask yourself the question, is that me? And the last thing that I want to encourage you to do is to, hey, build margin with friendships before you need it. All right? It's just that you can build it when you need it, but it's so much better. Take time ahead of time. Invest in friendships. I sent a text to one of my best friends. He and I are in contact at least every other week. I shot him the text of, hey, can you chat later today? All right, now it took time, it has taken time, but build those relationships before you need them. Hey, enjoy your time in your small group. Your small group, your life group together, and other people in your life are key components that give you a lot of margin. Invest in that, and y'all be better at that. So in your life groups, have some discussions about what it takes to be a really good friend, and then you work hard at surrounding yourself with people just like that. Hey look, sometimes great friends come at just the right time, and that is a rich blessing. Build margin